I'm quite interested in the talks that you give about Brighton.
Yes.
So you could ask the questions.
So you've been giving talks
Yes.
In and about Brighton
Yes.
for...
Well, what happened was when I joined the Brighton Society, I started taking slides because demolitions were taking place in Brighton, and I'd always been interested in Brighton because when I was at school along Dyke Road here, Tuesday afternoons were games. And I used to turn up and have my name taken on the football field, and then I used to disappear to the local cinema for that afternoon or wander the streets of Brighton. And I was very interested in Brighton history even before the war when I was at school. And so consequently I took a great number of slides of Brighton from about 1975 onwards. And I did a great deal of lecturing on Brighton. And I've got a tremendous collection of slides of Brighton, which I don't know, they'd give to the university possibly or something. I haven't worked out where it is. I haven't done a lecture now for about 18 months. The last one I did was on the Carlton Hill district. And I recorded it whilst I was doing it.
I don't know Carlton Hill at all.
Carlton Hill, it's on the east side of the Stein. If you go along from, say, St Peter's Church towards the seafront, on the right-hand side you've got North Lane. On the left-hand side you've got the steep hills going up. Well, that's the Carlton Hill district.
Oh. So it's the
Hanover, yeah, Hanover,
Street.
Southover, East Linwood, Albion Hill, Richmond Street, Sussex Street, all those. So it's the most colourful area.
People don't realise what a large area we're talking about. I'm sorry. This area really, taken as a whole, is bounded by Elm Grove, Rock Gardens,
Edward Street and Grand Parade, a huge area, and it was served from 1901 by the tram, which went right round from Rock Gardens, Elm Grove, down to the Stein, and the only link from the Stein back to Rock Gardens was by bus. And I rather like this picture of the changeover from the tram to the bus. It really meant, as it is today, there was no link at all into this area from the rest of Brighton. It was entirely by foot because of the steep hills, and if people wanted to do their shopping, it was mostly done in shops on the slopes, or else if they lived down the bottom of the area, they went to the open market. Oops, wrong way?
Yeah, the other way.
Sorry. The other thing about this area was that from the very early times, there were no public baths there at all. Only the nearest public baths were in Cobden Road off Elm Grove, and the only other ones were in Park Street, the other side of Queen's, of Queen's Park. So as far as baths go, the whole area was without. This was the nearest one to Elm Grove. And this, even when I lived in Elm Grove in the 1930s, I was using these baths at that time, sixpence a go. You had to shout out more hot or more cold. So that shows you where the inhabitants weren't catered for in this respect. Now I've decided to do this along the valley, taking Richmond Hill, Sussex Street and Carlton Hill in turn. This is the bottom of Richmond as it is today. We always call it Richmond Hill in Brighton, although strictly speaking, it's not Richmond Hill. That is it today. Considerably widened at the bottom. And if we walk up, we see this view as it was before the demolitions took place. A very narrow street. The building line on the left-hand side is roughly where it is today, but on the right-hand side it's been completely set back. On the left is the first turning. The first turning on the left is Albion Street. There it is today, and the only building left from that period is the 3-storey house on the left-hand side. The whole of the street has since been rebuilt. That is it today, and that's as it was, and that is the 3-storied house that you can see on the left-hand side. There it is, the only thing left. Beautiful cobblework on the right-hand side. Well, this is Richmond Parade, just around the corner, looking up to the new development. Well, there were some very charming buildings in Richmond Hill. And this will give you a good example. That's just up the hill from Richmond Parade. A beautiful little cluster of buildings just before you got to the wall across to stop the horses running down. Now, I remember this wall quite well, and it's well illustrated in the books that you have on show. We went across, and I can remember using it up to the late 30s. Yeah, the problem here in this area was the fact that the hills were so steep, they didn't really know what to do in terracing the houses. So what they did, they built a series of gigantic walls. And this is one of them. You can see the height of the wall. It solved the problem of the hill. And there's another one. Now, this one still exists. And if you walk up Richmond Street and up on the steps near Ashton Rise, and this wall is still there. Now, I've often tried to work out how high it is. There used to be a row of cottages at the top called Dynapore Street, which had a reputation of being the very worst street in the whole neighbourhood. If there's anybody here who lived in Dynapore Street, then I have to apologise. But the reason why I know this area was that in the mid-30s, my father and I used to go fishing on Sunday. And before the tram started, we had to walk through this area carrying our fishing tackle. And consequently, at that time, there were certain unruly streets. After a Saturday night brawl, we never knew quite what was happening. So with apologies to anybody who used to live in Dynapore Street, we had to avoid it completely. And Dynapore Street ran along the top of this wall, and you can still see this gigantic structure. I can't work out the height of this wall. Perhaps Malcolm can give me an estimate. What would you estimate?
Well, if you look, that little shed is, say, 2 metres. Then the top of the wall must be at least 8 or 10. So you're talking about 10 metres.
Yep, well, that's still there. And it's a magnificent piece of Victorian engineering. If we go up a little way, we come to Sussex Terrace. Now, this is what I call a new development there. Shortly after we formed the Brighton Society, I went round with my black and white camera and photographed quite a number of these places. This is the development there. In the back is the top part of Richmond Street near Chates Farm. And this is, the next one is a photograph that I took from exactly the same spot before the development took place. Now that is the exact spot, and then that's a photograph that is Chates Farm before it was demolished. And I think came down round about 1970, yes, 1975 to 1980. It was a great shame, but it had to go, obviously, to be developed. The houses on the right-hand side are still there, and one mustn't forget that the council undertook a vast programme of putting bathrooms into all these houses that were left after the development. Is that in focus? Now I'm leaving Richmond and I've come to Sussex Street. Well, here we are today, looking at it from Grand Parade and the Open, the fruit market is on the right-hand side. But it has changed considerably since this was taken. And here it is in the next one as it was before the demolitions took place. Now that's exactly the same spot. It's quite unbelievable. The area on the right-hand side between Sussex Street and Carlton Hill was possibly one of the worst, what we call, or some people call slums, which we'll come to in a little while. So we are now coming to what I call the earlier development. You see this area was developed pre-Regency. It started around about 1795, but to 1800. And it was developed what we might call Georgian, then into Regency for 10 years. And it was still being built after the Regency was finished, and what we might call late Georgian. So there were some very, very good examples of houses that in the town we praise now and say, look at what Brighton can offer. But Brighton can offer an awful lot from these. Well, if we go up Sussex Street, we come to Claremont Row. Now this Claremont Row, I think this is a lovely photograph. The houses here were demolished round about 1935, and one claim to fame on the houses on the right hand side was towards the end of the Second World War, prefabs were built all the way along here, and there's some rather nice photographs in existence of all these prefabs taking the place of these 1825 houses. Well, going a little way up Sussex Street, we have Kingswood and Milner flats, but these were built in the mid-30s to replace Nelson, the little clutch of streets. They're called Nelson. Now, the amusing thing about this area is that they adopted very, very aristocratic and famous names for their streets. And if you think about it, Carlton was very posh. Nelson, he was one. Sussex Street, they tried to be aristocratic. And in the middle of this, I think it was Nelson Street, and you can just see on the left-hand side was what I call the second wall of these streets. It was to stop, you probably know this, it was to stop the horses galloping down the hill. They got rid of the one in Richmond Street because they developed the large blocks of flats there, but here they retained it. And you can just see that they rebuilt it in exactly the same position on the left-hand side there. So that was in the position of what you've just seen, which Nelson, Milner Flats and Kingswood Flats, that's in exactly the same position. And I think this photograph shows that what I call the desolate side of the whole area are not the lovely cobbled houses and little terraces, but this shows the stark poverty. We often wonder who built these terraces and why they were built so badly. I don't think we should ever know the answer. It had nothing to do with the development of the railway, because the railway had come by this time. And so you had this development rapidly going along the east side of the valley, whereas on the North Lane side of the valley, there was very little at all. But here these streets sprang up over a matter of months. This typifies to me the very worst of the area. Well, there is the position of the original wall across Sussex Street, which has been rebuilt in exactly the same spot. You see, they had, when they developed the area, they still had the same problem. They didn't have horses, but they had cars. And they realized that if they developed the area, they would have to retain a wall across. So there it is. The pub that you can see on the top left-hand side is replaced as the much earlier pub. Now, in the book that you have over there, there is a very good photograph of this wall as it was. It's a splendid photograph. Some years ago, I was idly looking through a book on Sussex, and I found, to my amazement, a little pen and ink drawing of the original wall. And I made a slide of it. So if you look at this, keep this in your mind, and then look at this, and it'll work the next slide out to see what it was like. And there was still a pub in the top left-hand corner. Now, I'm afraid if you look at it for a little while, you suddenly pick out there's the wall, and on the left-hand side, and the pub is there, and the street lamp. But it was just an indication that it was rather a picturesque wall, even in these days. I think this was drawn about 1875, so the horses didn't bolt anymore. Now, I don't remember this wall. It was demolished round about, it was 1935, but I don't remember coming down the steps. I remember the one on Richmond Street, but not this one. And the reason is that when we came to fishing on a Sunday morning, as I say, we avoided certain streets because they had a bad reputation, and we didn't cut through, to use the term, at this wall. We continued straight down at a higher level. And the thing about this area is that you can draw a line across roughly level with, yes, roughly where the wall was. North of that has remained to a great degree. Albion Hill has been tarted up. Top of Richmond has been tarted up. They've all had bathrooms put in. So north of this wall, to a great degree, remains. But is this area south of the wall, which is of great importance to us. If we go up past there a little way, we come to the top of Sussex Street. Well, here there was a development, which you'll see in a moment. And one of the interesting things about these photographs is the fact that when they were taken prior to the demolition, they were taken by the council photographer. We had manhole covers and drain covers on the pavements and in the road. In many of the cases, they have remained to this day. And you could see that cover on the right-hand side on the pavement, that was there even in the very, very early photographs. So if you keep this in mind, this is what was there before. But I think it really, you can read an awful lot into this. Children played in the street. Marvellous, they were very poor. But as Selma said, there was a standard of living which was not slum. They were very, very poor. The money just wasn't there. They lived within their community. And the one thing is the number of shops in this area, quite amazing. The best example still remaining, in my opinion, is Southover Street, which still has a lot of the shops there, still has the same width, the same houses. And when you walk up Southover Street, in many cases you feel you are walking back into this period. Well, now I'm coming down to the bottom of Carlton Hill. Now, Carlton Hill that area was about the first to be developed. And it is there. Really, we found some of the most beautiful pre-Regency buildings that were in existence. Now you can see the cobblework here. I mean, nowadays this would be treasure, absolutely treasure, but I think I'm right in saying the reason why they all disappeared was that the council couldn't get any money to bring these up to standard. The government said you can't have any money unless you demolish and build a new estate. So, consequently, White Hawk was built, Molescoombe was also built, and these were demolished. What can one say? There was an awful lot of stuff there that was bad, but I think, and Selma agrees with me on this, if there had been a very sensible guiding hand in this area, a lot could have been saved. The same thing happened in Bath, where many of the Georgian terraces were just ruthlessly destroyed, and there's a marvellous book called The Sack of Bath, which has a picture of all of these Georgian terraces in, and the same thing happened here. Much earlier than Bath. Bath was comparatively recent compared with this. Well, look at the cobble work there, absolutely charming. But the great drawback here in the Carlton Hill area was the fact that the water supply was to a great degree from wells. The sewage disposal was pretty awful. You had cesspits. And what happened was, in many cases, that the overflow from the cesspit went into the drinking supply. And if in the middle of the 19th century there were cholera epidemics, especially in the Carlton Hill area, and the area which was designated a bad cholera area, believe it or not, was Upper North Street. Now, Upper North Street is regarded now as being quite upper class, a beautiful terrace with your antique shops. But it was a cholera centre in the middle of the 19th century. And the houses of Upper North Street were built in 1842, so you could see that between 1840 and roughly 1870 there's an awful lot of disease. And you can see in these pictures that there was quite a lot of drainage down the middle. I like this one very, very much.
Lovely shallow bows, aren't they?
Very shallow bows, almost imperceptible.
What street is that?
These were some of the first to be demolished. They started demolishing these in the early 30s. Prior to that time, they were talking about demolition, but they hadn't really started. And of course, the Second World War did halt a lot of stuff. So I was very lucky here because I started at what I still call the art school as an architectural student in 1939. And so the week after the war was declared, a lot of this was still in existence just around the corner from the art school. And I remember that we used to go, and in the back of the art school was a little chapel. I think it was a Catholic chapel, probably Selma knows.
I think it was Catholic Apostolic.
That's it, Catholic Apostolic. And we dug air raid shelters in the garden. They're just adjacent to the church. Of course, that's been destroyed since the art school was expanded right back. So some of this was still there when I was a student.
Did the residents sit outside in a row like that? Was that packed with people when you walked through?
My memory is of barrows.
Barrows, right?
Barrows, yes. It was, I don't remember people as such.
No?
But I remember there was a street life. I think they were itinerant people. Rather interesting thing here is from the point of view. Oh, I'm glad you raised the point, because in the 30s I remember very well that there were quite a number of very strange characters who plied their ware in these streets. And there was a gentleman known locally as Shylock, who lived at the bottom of Richmond Street, and he sold apples from a barrow. But he had moments of where he lost his reason completely, and people he for quite a lot of the time he was all right, but then suddenly he would have a brainstorm, and on one occasion, and I can vouch for this, when my father and I, we were just near St. Peter's Church, he ordered his barrow to drink from the fountain, which is just in front of St. Peter's Church, and the barrow didn't drink, so he tipped his barrow of apples into the fountain. That's a very, very vivid memory. Another one was an ice cream seller called Pip Baroli, and he sold his ice cream in these streets, and he, thinking about modern day hygiene, his ice cream barrel was drawn by a pony, and consequently he looked after this pony and then did the ice cream cornets without washing his hands or anything like that. And this was in the 30s. And just after the Second World War, he opened an ice cream parlour in Oxford Street and became very upmarket. And he was there until he died. He came from Naples, and he was beloved by the people, local people. He was an extremely friendly man. So that's another memory of this area. Pip Piroli and his pony.
Which street was this one, Robert?
This is
Carlton Row.
Carlton Row. Yeah, you're right. I honestly, I get mixed up with the names.
Sure.
You see, you've got your Carltons and your Nelsons all together. The very worst. A good formula here is that the very worst slums here, they were slums in the end, and they were named Carlton and Nelson. The very, very worst slums, oddly enough, were not in this area at all. They were at the top. They were near Rock Gardens, between Rock Gardens and just down St James's Street. And they had the reputation for being very dreadful slums, and they were demolished in the middle of the 19th century because the town council felt that they were so awful. And it's now St James's Avenue, I believe, very smart red brick houses. And of course the other awful slums were where the clock tower stands now, which they went under the names of Durham and Petty France. And they were all demolished when they formed Queen's Road and built the clock tower. Well, same area. It's either Carlton or Nelson. I know it's awful not to know which, but that's just adjacent to the one we've seen previously. This, I think, does show you that the living was difficult for these people. Again, where did they work? Well, it's very difficult, I suppose. They had a lot of trades at home because they used to cure smoked herring in places, and they all plied their trades to let. I think if it was today, there'd be a rush to rent it. I think they rather like it.
Is that one of the barrows there?
Yes, that's one of the barrows. Yeah. So narrow. And I often wonder why at the bottom of Carlton Hill in this area, they did this so close. I mean, they wanted to cram as much living accommodation as they could in these narrow plots of land. Another one, same area, next up the road. It's pretty depressing, really. And you see the front gardens. Where they had front gardens, they built brick walls. This is something rather unique in this area. I don't know why they did. The timber fences weren't all that prevalent. It was those sort of there was stone walls, I beg your pardon. So you had these stone walls, and you could see the state of the road. I mean, from a hygiene point of view, it was pretty awful. Now, this is one of my favourite photographs. This is a little way up the road near where Milner and Kingswood flats are. And you had this delightful little row of houses with that oriel window, which I don't think that there was another one in Brighton like it. This is one of my favourite slides. And when this was demolished, Milner Flats and Kingswood were built on this site, as you'll see in a moment. Well, that's the view from where you were standing before, looking through these terrible flats. I don't know really what to say. They're dated from 1935, when the previous buildings were pulled down. And I think the intention was very good, very much like some of the flats in the East End of London, where the intention was very commendable. But things didn't work out as they expected, and I think this happened with Milner and Kingswood flats. It's extremely depressing, and I don't know if anybody's walked up there recently. I tell you, it's the people, it's the architecture here. It's not people, it's architecture, which is the most dreadful thing. Well, here we are. There's another barrow. This is what I mean by barrows. This is just a little way up from there. On the left-hand side, going up Carlton Hill, look at those lovely cobblework on the right-hand side. Goodness me, they're now selling these as a Bijou Regency residences, aren't they? And yet the interesting thing about this, from the architectural point of view, was that talking architecturally about what I call the golden proportion of window panes, certain proportions were comfortable and were largely used, in Rerun, in Georgian architecture, these backstreet houses still retain that proportion of window. And I've often wondered why. It wasn't a question of aesthetics. They probably took it from the book patterns and just made them from the book patterns just the same as Chippendale did his patterns for furniture. And so you had these streets. Now, if they were there, they'd be exceptionally fashionable addresses. Well, now this is the end of Kingswood Flats, which you can see. Now, I took this photograph after the buildings farther up the hill were demolished. Those buildings there where you're going up towards Carlton Hill School. And when I took the next photograph, they were just about to demolish the buildings occupying that area of land. And that is just to say, I'll go back if I may. That's the site. There it is. That is just opposite the police station. And I don't know what the building was on the corner. It might have been St. John's School. I'm not sure. I couldn't find a reference to it. But I knew that these were going to be demolished, so I went up there. And again, I'm into the period now of the early years of the Brighton Society and watching these being demolished. So I knew that they're going to come down very shortly. So I went up and took this photograph. I haven't been up there lately. I don't know if the corner site there has been developed, but one amusing memory I have of this corner, and just behind it was immediately after the war, when I went back as a student to the art school. They had a row of prefabs, and they also had a British restaurant, and we used to go from the art school for 1 and 6pence. We used to get a meal. So this is a memory I have of this very, very vividly. I don't know if anybody's been into Carlton Hill recently, whether this still exists, or whether they've built on the corner or not.
It's a block of flats.
They must have done.
It's a block of flats.
Must have done block of flats, yeah.
You'll find a new block of flats is a similar height.
Similar?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was very sad because I knew this was almost the last bit of old Brighton in this area that was still in existence. And that's why I really had to go up, and you can see the first photographs I took in around about 1974 and 1975 were all black and white. And it shows that much later colour photography had come in. So I was able to get a bit of colour after that one.
Is that a Methodist chapel?
No, I can't find a reference.
No, it was St. John's School.
It was, I think, St. John's School. It was a big one, yes, but I don't know what the little place was.
Well, the little place was too.
Was it?
Yeah, St. John's School.
Was it?
But there's the tree which marks the corner of Riding School Lane.
Oh, yes, there it is on the right-hand side. Yeah.
Miraculously, it's still there.
Yeah, go up and stroke it. Treat it the same way as we treat the post in West Street. You know, marking the Thrale's house. We go up and stroke this tree and pray that it stays there. I'm not quite sure why I put this in. I think it's crept in unless I've got a photograph as it was.
Albion Street. Robert?
What?
Albion Street.
Is it? You are more knowledgeable on these streets than I am. There again, you've got those stone walls, unique to this neighbourhood. Camden Terrace. I believe in this terrace you've got a bit of a charm that could have been resurrected if people had moved up. I had to put this up as indication. This is one of the black and white back street photographs that just sums up the conditions in parts of Carlton Hill that were there. Look at it. I mean, it couldn't be worse. And it is really in a photograph that I think that the word slum is possibly justified. But I fear when I use that word, I'm being very unfair to the residents. That was pretty miserable existence, as you must admit.
Did you take that photograph?
No, this was taken by a council photographer in the early 1930s.
Well, it's just the make of that car. The car is 1950s, late 1940s, 50s.
I think it's one of the 50s ones.
I'm not sure whether it was there were two sessions. There was a session in the 30s, and then you had the later one in the 50s. And I'm not sure which one this is, quite honestly. Well, I've decided to leave Carlton Hill and go into this, which you possibly recognise immediately. Bottom of Edward Street as it is today.
That is Langston? Then they use corporation, not residential.
Really? Well, the buildings on the right-hand side are still there, but of course the street itself was only the same width, roughly as where that dotted line comes down where the cars are. And this is as it is now. And this is it as it was before it was widened. And you will see the house on the right-hand side, the cobbled house is still there. So you can see it was really a desperate street. And again, going back on memories, I think I'm right in saying, but I can't prove it, that in Brighton, the rest of Brighton said that on a Saturday night, the police would not go up there unless they were in pairs. And even then, they didn't like going up there because it was such a rough neighbourhood. Well, there's the bottom of Edward Street, and if we go up a little way, on the left-hand side, we get a very good example of what I'm talking about, central drainage. That drain took everything. And when there was storms or anything like that, and the cesspits overflowed, then this was a pretty dreadful situation. And this is the bottom, right at the bottom of Edward Street. On the left-hand side.
What's that?
Oh, sorry, I've gone the wrong way.
Is that William?
No, that's Sun Street, isn't it?
Sun Street.
Is that Sun Street?
No, Sun Street's the next one.
Oh.
Is that William Street or Sun Street?
William Street.
That's William Street, yeah. That's William Street now. William Street, as it was, is that...
William Street?
Now again, this is one of my favourite photographs. You can see the lovely little ground floor bow windows. The proportion of the upper windows are absolutely perfect. The width of the road is absolutely right for the heights of the buildings. And in my opinion, this was not an error on the part of the builders, but it was a mistake. They did it so well, they didn't realise they're producing something which was so attractive. And there's so many streets in the East End of London of this nature which disappeared.
Robert, do you remember it at all? Do you remember?
No, I don't remember. I don't remember that because it was demolished before. This is a photograph looking down Edward Street. And on the right-hand side, you've got the American Express and the law courts. Is it in focus?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
On the left-hand side, luckily, quite a lot has been preserved, but for how long, I don't know. What was it like before the road was widened? Well, there it is, same view exactly, exact same view. I think the pub down there, was it the Great Globe?
That's a bit further up, Robert.
Is it? Yeah, I'm not sure. I could. There's the Globe there.
That's the Great Globe.
That's the Great Globe. Yeah, yeah. And I remember this very, very well because when I went back to the art school after the war, I was an avid collector of old gramophone records. And there were so many second-hand shops in this area with piles of these dusty old records. And I used to come around the corner from the art school, and I used to go into the shop, which you see on the right-hand side there. I used to find treasure upon treasure in my collecting days. And you're looking down the bottom of Riding School Lane. There it is, and they were all swept away. So I have a sort of big fond association with this photograph. There is the American Express. What was demolished? Well, before they demolished, I went up there with my camera. And that is the exact spot where the American Express is now. Roger, do you know the name of that pub?
That's Mile Street. There's a nice street actually behind there.
Yeah. Well, this is Mile Street before it was cut in half, and American Express acquired half of it. And the top half of Mile Street is still there with the early farmhouse. Well, this pub is quite authenticated. There are one or two underground passages running down from this pub down towards Edward Street. I don't think anybody knows the exact function of them, but it is well documented that in the Second World War they were used as air raid shelters by people in the pub. So it's not fiction, it really did happen. I mean, there's so much underground in Brighton, which is waiting to be discovered. Well, this is an unknown road, but it is one of those taken in the, I think the mid-50s, in the 50s, when demolition was taking place at the top of Edward Street. This is between Edward Street and Carlton Hill. So, well, what a desolate site this was. And again, I'm coming back to the early years of the Brighton Society. We were witnessing this happening. No wonder we formed a society. Street upon street was like this, and it was so depressing. You wonder what was going to be built there. There's a good example of what I say with the proportion of the windows. I think it's again a charming picture of the type of house between Edward Street and Carlton Hill that was being demolished.
Not Cavendish Street?
No, it's not Cavendish Street. It's not labelled, unfortunately. And look, I mean, you can see what beauty there had been in these houses. The door with the hood over, wonderful. So you've got the circular top on the right-hand side. Again, one of my favourite photographs. Again, in the top of the Carlton Hill area.
I think it's Miles Street, that one.
I'm not sure. I'll accept your word there. I've strayed over a little bit to George Street. So I'm between it. I'm between Edward Street and St James's Street. This is George Street, and you can see by the bonnet, by the white car on the left-hand side, there's an archway which was the entrance to Howell's almshouses, which were demolished, and Summerfield Supermarket took it as their car park. Well, if you can see the archway there when they demolished the almshouses. They also demolished the archway with a sign above it saying Howell's Almshouses, and that was those were the almshouses at the back just before demolition. They were demolished round about, I think, 1975, so they were comparatively recently, and the infill in George Street, as you can see there, it was quite well done. They demolished the old entrance to the almshouses and filled it in. But you can trace, if you go down one of the little alleyways, you can trace where they used to go through. My last slide is of two Italian street musicians, Mark Antonio and Alexander. They both came from the Edward Street area, from the Italian colony. They played in North Street and outside Hannington's, and in the East Street part of Brighton. They used to play the paddle steamers going over to Boulogne on a Sunday trip. And I remember when I used to go over with my family in the 30s, I was very impressed by their playing. But I wasn't really conscious of a romantic attitude. I think if it had been 5 years later, I would have really appreciated it a great deal. If I remember correctly, the violinist was the first one to die, and the harpists carried on until probably the late 50s. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.